Shalom, everyone. Actually, today is Shabbat Shalom. I just want to take a moment to pray, and then we're just going to get started. Father, I beseech you, Father, that you would show each and every one of us, Father, how to shine forth in righteousness like the stars that lead many to righteousness, Father. Dying to our flesh, dying to that which is truly non-living, and coming into the land of the quote-unquote living, the living that are alive in Messiah. Hallelujah. In Yahuwah's name, hallelujah. Thank you, Father. As you all saw, the title is The Stars. No, we are not worshiping the stars. We are not worshiping the sun. We are not worshiping the moon. This is a picture that Yahuwah has painted for us here in the natural. And what a beautiful picture he has painted for us to see, for those that have eyes to see and ears to hear, that their hearts might turn and repent, and they might be like the stars that lead many to righteousness. Praise Yah. Okay, so off we go. This is actually going to bring together the last two videos, the one on the Sapphire and the one on the Ruby, the one on the Sapphire going to the moon line, the one on the Ruby going to the sun line. So we're going to have the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the beautiful picture in all three of these put together that they've painted. So we're going to start at 1 Corinthians 15, verse 35. But someone might say, how are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come? Senseless one, what you sow is not made alive unless it dies. Want to read a definition? Just stop right there and read this. Germination of seeds is a process by which seed-bearing plants change from living, non-reproducing life. We can't reproduce life in Messiah. They change from living, non-reproducing life to living, reproducing life in the plant. We've been changed. The seed that's been planted has changed us from earthly, now able to go into the kingdom with the living Elohim that he's planted inside of us. At germination, the plant does not begin life, but rather it resumes the growth and development that was temporarily suspended. No seed will germinate unless it has imbibed in water. I just want us to get that picture of the seed. Non-living, earthly, living, spiritual. Verse 37. And as to what you sow, you do not sow the body which is to be, the fleshly, but a bare grain. It might be wheat or some other grain. But Elohim gives it a body as he wishes, and to each seed a body of its own. We all have different gifts as we sojourn here on this earth. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one flesh of men, and another flesh of beasts, and another of fishes, and another of birds, and heavenly bodies, and earthly bodies. But the esteem of the heavenly is truly one, because that of the Shemayim and the bodies of what we see, the sun, the moon, and the stars, all run in their perfect order just as they should run. The sun being a picture of the bridegroom coming out of his chamber that's shed his blood. Go back and see the Ruby video. The moon being a picture of what Yahuwah walked on when Moshe and Aaron and the elders looked up and saw him walking on this paved work. No, it's a white work of sapphire, the pure DNA. The quote-unquote grid that they are so loving to imitate. The esteem of the earthly is another. The esteem of the earthly is dying to the flesh. One esteem of the sun, the blood of Messiah. Another esteem of the moon, the DNA which it contains. And another esteem of the stars. For star differs from star in esteem. We all have different gifts. The stars lead many to righteousness. Abraham had some stars. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption, earthly. It is raised in incorruption, spiritual. It is sown in disrespect, earthly. It is raised in esteem, spiritual. It is sown in weakness, earthly. It is raised in power, spiritual. It is sown a natural body, earthly. It is raised in a spiritual body. There is a natural body, earthly, and there is a spiritual body, spiritual. Heaven and earth. The heavens and the earth. We're now tying the heaven and the earth together. All throughout scriptures, heaven and earth were his witnesses. This is beautiful if we can see the picture. So we're looking at the stars this time. I'll try not to get too far off. 1 Corinthians, we're going back to 1540, and there are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, spiritual and earthly. A picture of the perfection, so as we have it here before it rolls up like a scroll, and the earthly, dying to the flesh. But the esteem of the heavenly is truly one. It all works together as one. And the esteem of the earthly is another. Doesn't mean there's more than one Messiah, because we're all one. We're one in Messiah. He is one with the Father. It's all one. 1 Corinthians 15:41, one esteem of the sun, another esteem of the moon, and another esteem of the star, for star differs from star in esteem. Strong's G792 is a star, probably from the base of G4766. A star as strewn over the sky, literally or figuratively. How about literally and figuratively? We're going to trace it back to Genesis 1:14. And Elohim said, "Let the lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens, to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the Shemayim, to give light on the earth." Heaven and earth will be his witnesses. And it came to be so. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And Elohim set them in the expanse of the Shemayim to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day, and rule over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was Tob, and there came to be evening, and there came to be morning on the fourth day. Remember, it's the fourth day. So here we have our word for stars. It is 1232 BG in the ancient Hebrew lexicon. Right here. Well, let's do it this way. From right to left, a kaf, a wa, a bait, and a bait. It's a star. Comes from the two-letter root line, kaf bait. The concrete is a star. Oh, where's that thing I wrote down? The pictograph kaf is a picture of the palm of the hand and represents a covering. The bait is a picture of a tent. Combined, these mean covering of the tent. The black goat hair fabric used for the roof of the tent allows some light through, giving the appearance of stars overhead. When it rains, the hair fibers swell, sealing all of the holes. So there are several ways we could go with the stars. You could go, when I start reading this, you'll see that we could go with a calendar. You'll see that we could go with equal weights and measures, which is somewhat what this study lies on. You could see that we could go with love covers. Love covers the multitude of sins for the house. And that's somewhat where this study is going to go. We're going to kind of combine the last two and see just who these stars are and what they're doing. So here we have a kaf, It means to bend, allow, cover, tame, open, bless. We have the wa. Hua. A tent peg. Add, secure, hook, join, pierce. The bait. House, family, inside, with, piece, divide, and another house, the same definitions. And I think I've given you the benefit mostly of my notes down here. I'll give you a little more line on that. I don't care if you see my notes. It is the job of the stars, those that are leading many to righteousness, like the stars of the Shemaim that are after the seed of Isaac, to cover securely the family and the house in love. Protect them from the storm, what the adversary would now be calling the perfect storm. Because you don't want it to rain in your house. Now, do you want to receive the rain of the word? Of course you do. But this is talking about coming into your house and ruining the things that are in your house. Geometrically, these stars are placed to run with the sun and the moon on the cycles that Yah has created. They have found this out in the world of physics. They have found this out in the world of science. And mark my words, they are using it against the bride of Yahuwah Elohim, because the dragon wants nothing more than to devour her seed. So we are each supposed to be placed where we are. We are supposed to be dying to the flesh here on the earth and leading others to righteousness wherever He has placed us. And I'm going to say, geometrically, so to speak, just like the stars. Remember, they're covering to secure the family that will be in the house of Elohim. So now I'm going to read from this book right here. It's by Joseph Farrell. Do not agree with him theologically. However, he's a brilliant researcher. When it comes to things physics, science, calendar, ancient texts, the man is brilliant. And he's a brilliant researcher. Again, I do not agree with him theologically. I would not encourage you to read this book if you are not solidly grounded in Yahuwah Elohim. It takes reading between the lines. Isn't that an interesting concept, Stephanie? We're going to read between the lines. We're going to read between the light poles, huh? Page 33. And he does quote some other authors in here. I'll try to remember to tell you each one that he quotes, because I think footnotes, just like he thinks, I think footnotes are a big deal, and you absolutely give credit where credit is due. And then people can go back and find it. Okay, page 33. The title of this section is An Oxford Professor Overturns the Standard Model. Well, imagine that. Everything you ever learned. Alexander Thom, his work and its implications. The professor, Alexander Thom, and the work he did was nothing less than brilliant. So brilliant was it, in fact, that his results continued to be questioned, a polite euphemism for rejected, by the history, anthropology, and archaeology communities within academia. Imagine that. Indeed, Thom was not a professional historian, anthropologist, or archaeologist. Imagine that. And that was part of the problem. He was an engineer and a mathematician. And like engineer Christopher Dunn, who wrote The Giza Power Plant, who would so vex Egyptologists and anthropologists by maintaining that the Great Pyramid was a machine, Thom's conclusions would fly wholesale in the face of the renewed assumptions of anthropology, archaeology, and historiography regarding the ancient pre-classical history of mankind. Thom's work is relatively difficult to come by, but British authors Christopher Knight and Alan Butler, who he will quote extensively here, are two researchers who have studied it thoroughly and popularized its findings, expanding on them and adding considerable insights of their own, and accordingly their works will be followed closely here. Born in the year 1894 in Scotland, Tom attended the University of Glasgow, and later returned there as an engineering lecturer. During World War II, Tom did work for the British government, and after the war was over, returned to the academy, this time assuming a post as a professor of engineering at the University of Oxford, where he remained until he retired in 1961. Like so many others associated with the University of Oxford, Tom developed an interest in the prehistory of man, suspecting that all was not well with the Standard Model. Tom's interest in megalithic structures began in his native Scotland, where he noticed that such sites appeared to have lunar alignments. In the early 1930s, he decided to study some of the sites and began a process of careful surveying that was to take him almost 5 decades. Spent a lot of time to come to these conclusions, and we don't even know what we don't even know. Back to the book. In addition to his lecturing, Alexander Thom was a highly talented engineer in his own right, and he taught himself surveying, which enabled him to look at more megalithic sites and in greater detail than anyone before or since. Well, at least that we know of, at least on a public level. In this concentration on close engineering and surveying observations of ancient structures, Tom was very much like another famous contemporary, Sir William Flinders Petrie, the surveyor par excellence of the Giza Plateau in Egypt. Tom's excavations and surveying work took him 5 decades, surveying sites from the gaunt and the impressive standing stone circles of the island of Orkney in the far north of Scotland, right down to the giant avenues of stones in their frozen march across the fields of Brittany in France, where Tom spent each and every summer for almost 5 decades, carefully measuring and making notes. Together with family and friends and associates, he gradually built up a greater database regarding megalithic achievements in building. Let me read that sentence again. Together with family and friends and associates, he gradually built up a greater database regarding megalithic achievement in building, more than anyone before or since, at least that we know of. Tom eventually published the results of his studies and surveying in an article written in 1951 for the Journal of the British Astronomical Association. The article was entitled "The Solar Observation of Megalithic Man." And over the next 3 years, Tom explained on this by adding 3 more articles for the Journal of the Royal Statistical Society, as well as publishing 3 books on his findings. Almost as soon as he had published his first article, the grumblings of discontent were heard from archaeologists and anthropologists, and by the time of his final articles and books, that grumbling had grown into a deafening silence after an initial flurry of stubborn rejection. We'll do that for a minute. As Knight and Butler state the case, the difference in approach between Tom and the general archaeological community is fundamental and boils down to a collision of techniques. Well might archaeologists have complained, for in essence, what Tom did was to prove that the supposedly primitively megalithic builders of Britain were profound astronomers, surveyors, and engineers in their own right. Just precisely what had Tom done to earn the ire of archaeologists? He had made a startling claim. Jeez. He maintained that he found that the structures left by late Stone Age man had been built using a standard unit of measure that was so precise that he could identify its central value to an accuracy that was less than the width of a human hair. The idea that these simple people from prehistory could have achieved such accuracy flies in the face of all the worldview of most archaeologists. But that was not the only problem, for this unit of measure spread throughout Brittany and France and in the British Isles. It went all across. It was everywhere there. It was consistent in its accuracy, and moreover was based, as we shall see in a moment, on extremely accurate astronomical, heavenly, and geodetic, earth, observations. How could it be, then, that the supposedly unsophisticated people of Stone Age Britain possessed a fully integrated system of measurement based on a deep understanding of the solar system, of the sun, the moon, and the stars? I'm going to say of the sun, the moon, and the stars. I just added that in. This, of course, was the real problem, for it implied a sophisticated knowledge base from which the ancient sites were constructed, and that, of course, raised the dreaded possibility that something much more sophisticated, by way of a civilization, had pre-existed the Stone Age peoples. In short, Tom's work raised the dreaded possibility of the A word, Atlantis. Just, if you can't handle that, just let it go and keep listening. In any case, this standard unit of astronomical, heavenly, and geodetic, earthly measure Tom called the megalithic yard, and it became a banner around which supporters of the theory of a pre-existent and sophisticated civilization rallied. Indeed, its mere existence posed a kind of historiographical problem for the standard views of human civilization's development. For, if he was wrong, the subject of statistics needs a fundamental reappraisal. If he's wrong, we got to figure something out. But if his findings were reliable, the subject of archaeology needs equally careful reassessment. No-brainer. Patterns of evidence. Just watch it. The first one. Further, if Tom was right, the development of human civilization may have to be rewritten. I know, right? In some extent. Knight and Butler quickly determined that the only hope of resolving the issue, once and for all, was to attempt to find a reason why this length of unit would have had meaning for Neolithic builders, and then to identify a methodology for reproducing such a length at different locations. And here is where the mystery becomes even more intriguing. Section A1, Tom's Megalithic Yard and the Expansions of Knight and Butler. To see just how intriguing the mystery is, we must first know exactly what Tom's megalithic measures were. Tom identified the use of a standard unit he called a megalithic yard, MY, which he specified as being equal to 2.722 feet plus minus 0.002, which is like, maybe it's less than a human hair, or half of a human hair. No, feet. Oh, it's not. It's feet. And then he gives the metric here. He claimed that there were also other related... Oh, no, it still might be a human hair. I don't know. I haven't done the measurement. He claimed that there were also other related units used repeatedly, including half and double megalithic yards, and a 2.5 megalithic yard length he dubbed the megalithic rod. On a smaller scale, he found that the megalithic builders had used a 40th part of a megalithic yard, which he called a megalithic inch, an MI, because it was 0.8166 of a modern inch. The system worked like this. One megalithic inch is 2.074 centimeters. 20 megalithic inches is a half a megalithic yard. 40 megalithic inches is 1 megalithic yard, and 100 megalithic inches is 1 megalithic rod. But there was not only system in this ancient structure of measure, there was amazing consistency over a very large area. How would that happen? The lifetime work of Alexander Thom and his rediscovery of the megalithic yard resulted in a stunning conclusion that created an immediate paradox. How could an otherwise primitive people build with such fine accuracy? Why did they do it? And how did they do it? Thom made no attempt to answer these questions. He reported on his engineering analysis and left the anthropological aspects for others to explain. He did comment that he could not understand how these builders transmitted the megalithic yard so perfectly over tens of thousands of square miles and across several millennia, and he acknowledged that the wooden measuring sticks could not have produced the unerring level of consistency he had found. No yardstick here. How indeed had they done it? And much more importantly, why? The problem posed by these questions only deepens when one considers the standard archaeological and anthropological view of where ancient measures came from. All across that way, they had equal weights and measures. According to Tom, the units he discovered were extraordinary because they were scientifically exact. Virtually all known units of measurement from the Sumerians and ancient Egyptians through to the Middle Ages are believed to have been based on average body parts such as fingers, hands, feet, and arms, and were therefore quite approximate. I'd say we got some then hiding under those words in Scripture. In other words, Tom's measurements recorded over several thousand square miles in Britain and France, and recording an accuracy of this ancient unit of measure to within a width of a human hair, it is, gave lie to the archaeological assumptions that ancient measures were based upon ever-varying body parts. Something else entirely was in play, and that is correct. The Methods. Part 2, The Methods. 2a. Tom's Ancient Bureau of Standards Theory. This fact posed an intriguing problem. Namely, could one reverse engineer the method by which supposedly primitive megalithic builders had derived such an accurate and consistent measure? One theory that attempts to do this is, for want of a better expression, the Ancient Bureau of Measures theory. Tom himself was at a loss to explain the consistent accuracy of the megalithic yard over such a large theory, and at first proposed the Ancient Bureau of Measures theory. This unit, and this is quoted from the Knight and Butler book, this unit was in use from one end of Britain to the other. It is not possible to detect, by statistical examination, any differences between the values determined in the English and the Scottish circles. There must have been a headquarters from which standard rods, a rod could be of two types, but in this context there are pieces of wood cut to represent the megalithic yard. They were sent out from the headquarters. The length of the rods in Scotland cannot have differed from that in England by more than 0.03 inches or 0.762 millimeters, or the difference would have shown up. If each small community had obtained the length by copying the rod from its neighbor to the south, the accumulated error would have been much greater than this. So that's not it. But there was a major problem with this theory, and Knight and Butler are quick to point it out. At that time, Tom's data could not be explained by any mechanism known to be available to the people of the late Stone Age, other than to assume that all the rods were made at the same place and delivered by hand to each and every community across Scotland and England. Eventually, he would find that the unit in use from the Hebrides to western France, which makes the central ruler factory theory look most unlikely. He also found it impossible to imagine why these early communities wanted to work to an exact standard unit. Sounds like what we should be doing. In other words, the unit was spread over too large an area for the Ancient Bureau of Standards theory to account for it. We will leave the full exposition of the answer to the question of why such primitive Stone Age people would have wanted to work to an exact standard of unit to a later point in this chapter. Which has to do with we're not going to get to that, but it has to do with financial aspect. Thus, effectively, we are back at square one. How did these primitive Stone Age peoples come up with such a unit of measure and reproduce it with unerring accuracy over such a wide area? The answer to that, according to Knight and Butler, is rather astounding and points in turn to a hidden and hardly primitive elite acting as a guiding hand and working behind the scenes. This has been going on for a very, very, very long time. Celestial geometries and the pendulum method. Section 3. The question of why such a primitive people would have need for such an accurate unit of measure spread over such a wide area is, however, crucial for understanding how they reproduced it. Knight and Butler states this methodological problem in the following fashion. We saw that the only hope of resolving the issue once and for all was to attempt to find a reason why this length of unit would have had meaning for the Neolithic builders, and then to identify a methodology for reproducing such a length at different locations. Optimally, this meant that what our megalithic mathematicians needed was a method of reproducing the megalithic yard that was simple to use, very accurate, and available to people dispersed over a large distance and across a huge span of time. Sounds like the stars to me that we're supposed to be placed where we're supposed to be placed. Let's find out. Unbelievable. Well, let me not say that, because it is. It was the classic engineer's optimization problem. For whatever this method was, it had to be a method that also ensured that the unit of length would not change across time or physical distance. And this meant, of course, that in all likelihood the unit was found on something with a fairly constant base in the natural world that would not change over time or physical location. That, of course, implied that the answer lay in the stars and in the earth themselves. And if this be the case, that the most obvious unit immediately known to such primitive observers would be a day. And this is where the ultimate basis of the method of reproducing an accurate unit of measure begins. There are various ways of defining a day, and the two principal types are what we now call a solar day and a sidereal day. A solar day is that measured from the zenith, the highest point of the sun, on 2 consecutive days. The average time of the sun's daily passage across the year is called a mean solar day. It is this type of day that we use for our timekeeping today. A sidereal day is the time it takes for one revolution of the planet, however you look at that, it's another story, measured by observing a star returning to the same point in the Shemayim on 2 consecutive nights. This is a real revolution because it is unaffected by the secondary motion of the Earth's orbit around the sun, or however that looks to you, whatever you're studying. That's for another time. This is not a flat Earth study. Maybe you can see through it. The sidereal day, or rotation period, is 236 seconds shorter than a mean solar day, and over the year these lost seconds add up to exactly 1 extra day, giving a year just over 366 sidereal days in terms of the Earth's rotation about its axis. In short, anyone who gauged the turning of the Earth by watching the stars would know full well that the planet turns a little over 366 times in a year. Or the stars go around, whichever. So it follows that this number would have great significance for such star watchers. If they considered each complete turn of the Earth to be 1 degree of the great circle of the Shemayim, or each time the stars came around, within which the sun, moon, and planets move, then they would also logically accept that there are 366 degrees in a circle. There really are 366 degrees in the most important circle of them all, the Earth's yearly orbit of the sun, or however you see that. Anything else is an arbitrary convention. It seemed to us that this was so logical that the 360-degree circle may have been a later adjustment to make arithmetic easier, as it is divisible by far more numbers than the real number of degrees in a year. In other words, the circle of geometry has become somehow detached from the circle of the Shemayim. Note carefully. Now Note, now we're back to Mr. Farrell speaking here. Note carefully that the implication of these remarks for the natural system of a celestial and geodetic measure, the heavenly and the earthly, would involve some system of a circle of 366 degrees, and Yah runs everything in a cycle. While at some later point, largely for the sake of simplified arithmetic calculation, a modified or tempered system was put into place by someone. This is a significant point that will be taken up again later in this chapter. But how was this original 366-degree system derived by such a primitive peoples? Seeking to reconstruct the thought processes of the megalithic builders, Knight and Butler came to some very practical conclusions. Imagine that. It is highly likely that they would also realize that sunrises across the year move exactly like a pendulum. As the spring equinox, currently around the 21st of March, the sun will rise due east, and then rise a little further north each day until the summer solstice, 21st of June, at which point it stops and reverses its direction back to the autumn equinox, and on to the winter solstice, by which time it will rise well into the south. The sun's behavior across a year as viewed from the earth creates exactly the same frequency model as a pendulum. It displays a faster rate of change in the center and slows gradually to the solstice extremes, where it stops and reverses direction. So the first problem was to puzzle over the issue of how any unit of time could possibly convert it into linear unit. The answer lay in the motion of the sun during a year, the pendulum. In a certain way, the same, of course, could be said of the motion of the nearby, I'm just going to read it, planets, such as Venus, for by using the very primitive machine of a pendulum and choosing a fixed reference point in the Shemaim and counting the beats or swings of the pendulum as a chosen star moved between fixed observation points on the horizon. The pendulum was a ready-made, simple machine easily within the technological capabilities of Megalithic builders, and moreover so closely tied to the invariable properties of the earth itself that it formed the perfect basis for the accuracy of megalithic measures over so wide an area. The reason for this is simple, for the pendulum links directly to the gravitational field, it's the electromagnetic field, of the earth, the notion of time as a beat frequency, and the conversion of both to a linear measure. The time it takes his pendulum, I'm quoting from Knight and Butler, the time it takes a pendulum to swing is governed by just two factors, the mass of the earth and the length of the pendulum from the fulcrum to the center of the gravity of the weight. Nothing else is of significant importance. The amount of effort that the person holding the pendulum puts into the swing has no bearing on the time per swing, because a more powerful motion will produce a wide arc and a higher speed of travel, whereas a low power swing will cause the weight to travel less distance at a reduced speed. Equally, the heaviness of the weight of the object on the end of the line is immaterial. A heavier or lighter weight will simply change the speed-distance ratio without having any effect on the time of the swing. The mass of the earth is a constant factor. And thus, in an area the size of the British Isles, anyone swinging a pendulum for a known number of swings in a fixed period of time will have almost exactly the same pendulum length. So the method was simple. If one erected two markers on the circle of the horizon, spaced 366th degree of a degree apart, and then watching a selected star pass between them, and through trial and error with pendulum lengths, eventually a length would be found that would produce a half a megalithic yard when swung 366 times as the star passed between the poles. And this would be the case regardless of where one was, and it would produce that length with unerring accuracy. Are we? There was absolutely no need for an ancient Bureau of Standards whatsoever. Part 4, Section 4. Beautiful numbers. The 366, 365, and 360 degree system. The 366-degree system also bears a close connection to a geodetic measure, an earthly measure, namely the polar circumference of the Earth. As Knight and Butler put it, the most common value quoted for the polar circumference of the Earth is 40,008 kilometers, which easily converts to 48,221,838 megalithic yards. By assuming that these ancient megalithic builders had divided each degree to 60 minutes of arc and each minute in turn to 6 seconds of arc, they are able to determine that 1 degree, or 1/366th of the polar circumference of the Earth, was 131,754 megalithic yards, and 1 minute, 1/60th of that value, was 2,196 megalithic yards. That, as they admitted, did not look too exciting. But when one divided the minute by 1 second, or 1/6th of a part, the final result was truly remarkable, for it yielded 366 megalithic yards. This astonishing result tied to yet another ancient measure, this time the so-called Minoan Foot, from the island of Crete. Noting that Professor J. Walter Graham of Princeton University had made the discovery of a standard unit of length that had been used in the design and construction of palaces on Crete, dating from the Minoan period, circa 2000 BC, Graham dubbed this unit a Minoan Foot, which he stated was equal to 30.36 centimeters. Knight and Butler then made the discovery that tied this measure to the whole 366-degree megalithic system they had found in Britain. Imagine our surprise when we realized that 1 second of arc in the assumed megalithic system, 366 megalithic yards, is equal to 303.6577 meters, which is exactly 1,000 Minoan feet. Given that Graham did not provide a level of accuracy greater than the 1/10 of a millimeter, this fit could just be a very, very strange coincidence, though I don't believe in those. But it has to be noted that several researchers now believe that the Minoan culture of Crete had ongoing contact with the people who were the megalithic builders of the British Isles. But this was not all. There was also use in ancient Greece of a unit measure known as the Olympian, or geographical foot, which, by general consent, measures what might at first seem like a meaningless 30.861 centimeters. And this raised even more peculiar relationships for Knight and Butler, for it exposed a hidden relationship between the megalithic 366-degree system and our now more familiar 360-degree system. Quoting from Knight and Butler, "We immediately noticed something special about the relationship between the Minoan foot and the later Greek foot, to an accuracy of an extremely close 99.99%. A distance of 366 Minoan feet is the same as 360 Greek feet. This was incredible, and we felt certain that it was not a coincidence. The two units did not need to have any integer relationships at all, yet they relate to each other in a megalithic to Sumerian manner. In other words, Sumeria, which was the origin of our modern 360-degree system, had entered the picture, and in a way that connected the two systems, the 366 and the 360-degree. The link is evident from the Sumerian number system itself, which was a sexagesimal system, that is to say, based on units of 6s, 10s, 60s, and multiples thereof, thus making numbers such as 36, 360, 3600, and 36,000 very Sumerian numbers. As we have already noted, it appears that the ancients, in deriving the 366-degree system to begin with, had noticed the transit of the sun through a year was approximately 365.25 days, and simply rounded that number up to the next whole number, 366. The Sumerians, who influenced the Egyptians, modified or tempered the entire system by coming up with a 360-degree system in use to this day to make the calculation easier. In other words, at first glance, it would appear that there was a certain point in prehistory, Sumerian reform to the megalithic system. This is the point of Knight and Butler, namely that the megalithic system is the oldest, and the Sumerian reform a later modification of it. But as we shall see later in this chapter, there is evidence from a very unusual place that the 360-degree system was in use long before the Sumerians or megalithic builders of Britain were even on the scene. For another study. But whatever the chronological relationship between the two systems was, there was nonetheless a mathematical one, as was evidenced by the relationship of the Minoan to the Greek foot, the former representing a measure based on the 366 system, and the latter one based on the 360 system. The problem was, what was it? Was it simply a case that the 360-degree circle may have been a later adjustment to make the arithmetic easier? Or was something else at work in addition to this? Knight and Butler quickly discovered what the mathematical relationship was. And the relationship was that of two absolutely critical and fundamental constants, those of F, with the value of 1.618, and pi, with the value of 3.14. Simply put, 360 divided by 5 equals 72. And 366 divided by pi times F also equals 72. While the division by 5 may seem arbitrary, wow, that brings to mind 5 virgins, it is not, for the constant F generates the well-known Fibonacci sequence, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on, where the first two numbers sum to the next number, and those two to the next, and so on. So 5 is in the harmonic series, so to speak, of F. Then Knight and Butler made another astonishing connection between the two systems, noting that the Thornborough henges pointed to the Mount in Lincoln over a distance of 127 kilometers away, and finding that the two sites lay exactly 1 megalithic degree apart, that is 366 times 60 times 6 megalithic yards from each other by latitude, and exactly 1 degree apart in the modern system of longitudinal, meant in effect that for a period of time the megalithic builders appeared to have used the 366 to measure the longitude and the 360 to measure the latitude. The Sumerian reform, on which our entire modern system is based, in other words, had consisted of nothing but the use of a 360-degree system to measure both. The next, section 5, last section. The next step, measures of volume and weight. Having thus found the means whereby an accurate unit of linear measure was so accurately reproduced over so wide an area, namely, through the use of a pendulum to count beats between the markers on a circle of the horizon, placed 1 degree apart in a 366-degree system, and thus between the two markers, star between them, pendulum, and thus converting the measure of time to a linear measure of distance. The next problem was to introduce accurate units of measure of volume and weight based on that same linear measure. Such a move would have been an important building block towards trade, which was in turn a key step towards true civilization. In other words, the necessary basis for international trade is accurate units of measure of volume and weight, and that accuracy can only be guaranteed by basing units of measure on the relative consistency of celestial motions in the geodetic properties of the earth itself. Here we have the heavens, the heavenly, and the earthly. Gosh, we are supposed to be these stars shining under righteousness with these accurate weights and measures and right ruling. Yah has set up the whole system as a picture for us, and the enemy has taken it and twisted it. Just look at the trade system today. Just look at Babylon's banksters. Go read Mr. Farrell's book on the Babylon banksters. What a sick and twisted system that the enemy has made from what Yah has made to be so beautiful. Continuing on. The problem was easily solved by performing what physicists call a dimensional rotation, i.e., simply taking the linear measure, a unit of 1 dimension, and rotating it into 2 dimensions, thus measuring area. and then finally into 3 dimensions, thus measuring volume. In short, the ancients simply cubed their megalithic yards, half yards, and so on to form the measures of volume. But when this was done, apparently I'm going to have a fly in here now. I'm going to get a fly swatter in a minute. But when this was done, Knight and Butler began to make another astonishing series of discoveries. In our case, the linear unit would have to be in megalithic inches, which Tom identified as being 1/40th of a megalithic yard, equal to 2.07415 centimeters. Taking this lead from the metric system, Chris first considered, one of the writers, a cube with the sides of 1/10 of a megalithic yard, i.e. 4 megalithic inches. In metric terms, this turned out to have the capacity of a little over half a liter, at 571.08 cubic centimeters. This result, an odd parallel between an ancient megalithic system of measure and the modern metric one, was odd, but hardly compelling in its own right. Section 6. Ancient and megalithic anticipations of the imperial and metric system. But then the problem became acute, and it was disclosed by a conversation between co-authors Alan Butler and Chris Knight. I reproduce it here, Mr. Farrell reproduces it here, because their reactions would most certainly have been my own, and most likely anyone else's doing the experiments and running the numbers. The conversation began with author Chris Knight. I think we have a problem. What sort of problem? Alan wanted to know. The problem of explaining the apparently impossible, said Chris. I started by checking out spheres with diameters of 5, 10, and 20 megalithic inches, and they also produce volumes that are quite close to the pint, the gallon, and the bushel. The accuracy level isn't quite as good as the cubes because the 5 megalithic inches sphere held 1.027 pints, which is still as close as anyone in the real world would ever need. But a quick check of the rules that govern the relationships between cubes and spheres revealed that to an accuracy of 99.256%, a cube with a side of 4 units will have the same volume as a sphere with a dimension of 5 units. Cube and a sphere. Which made the findings odd, but mathematically understandable. Alan was intrigued but puzzled. If there is no mystery about the pint sphere, why did you say you had to explain the impossible? He asked. What I've told you so far is the easy part of this conversation, because my next test took me from the rather weird to the downright ridiculous. What do you think that a 6 megalithic inch and a 60 megalithic inch diameter sphere would hold in terms of water? I can't guess. What would they hold? Alan asked, with not a little impatience. Well, the 6 megalithic inch sphere holds a liter and weighs a kilo. So the 60 megalithic inch sphere, 10 times 10 times 10 times as much, holds a cubic meter and weighs a metric ton. And it's incredibly accurate, too. Alan laughed aloud down the phone. Ha ha, very funny. He paused. You're joking, aren't you? No, you check it out, Alan. The numbers don't lie. The fit is better than 99% accurate. And when I tested the same principles using modern inches and centimeters for the spheres, there were no meaningful results at all. Something truly weird is going on here. In other words, when modern imperial inches or metric centimeters were used to construct spheres and cubes, there was no meaningful results at all. But when the ancient megalithic inch, you think that the adversary doesn't know this? But when the ancient megalithic inch was used to construct cubes and spheres, the result was, in the case of cubes, modern British imperial units of volume. In the case of spheres, modern metric units of volume and weight. In other words, both the modern imperial and metric systems of volume appeared to be related to the ancient units of measure precisely as being based on cubing and spearing. And further research revealed that even the imperial weights appeared to be derived by cubing a unit 1/10 the length of the megalithic yard. But in order to demonstrate the suggestion that there may indeed be an actual link between the two systems, a link stemming from ancient times, one would have to reproduce an ancient unit of measure that bears a resemblance to one or the other system. There was indeed such a unit. which the Sumerians called the double cush, approximately 99.88 centimeters long, which oddly enough made the length of a pendulum swing of 1 second for accurate timekeeping. All of this was compelling evidence that there was not only a deeply ancient root and relationship between the modern British imperial and metric systems of volumes and weight, but that root and relationship stemmed from a unit of megalithic linear measure that was cubed and speared. All of this suggested, in other words, as Knight and Butler themselves commented, that someone very much wanted to jumpstart civilization and create the condition necessary for international trade. Someone like a hidden elite, like we see today. And this is where the story of that hidden elite and its agendas takes another astonishing turn. And the book continues on. Again, this is the book. Genes, Giants, Monsters, and Men by Joseph P. Farrell. Again, if you don't have a strong foundation in Yahuwah, in his word, in the Tarot, I would wait to read it. That's my humble opinion. The whole reason I read all that was to point out whether it doesn't matter if you're flat or round earth to me. I mean, I've got my opinion. I'm not here to argue that today. The whole measuring system, the whole timekeeping system was heavenly and geodetic, earthly. And so it was based on the circle. And we're supposed, this is always on a cycle, always on a cycle, always on a cycle. One revolution of man, it's the Dal Resh, it's the Dalit Resh. It's the back and forth movement of man. It's about the cyclical cycle of man. Oops, I went backwards. Oops. It's about but there were two stars. And between that point, is how everything was kept and measured. We would consider it right ruling. We would consider it in the right place at the right time. Everything is to be measured by the standard of how the heavenlies work together, and we are supposed to be the stars shining in righteousness that lead many to righteousness by equal weights and measures, by covering, Kaf, and securing Hua, the family, Beit, that is in the house, Beit of Elohim. And what we see up there as far as equal weights and measures is what Yahuwah put into place to begin with. Can we see the picture? It's a beautiful picture. The enemy has taken it and he's twisted it to his own advantage. This hidden elite knows it. And thereafter, you. They don't care so much about the ones they already have unless they think there's a chance they're going to get away and not burn in the lake of fire to destroy that DNA. They're after you. Anything but equal weights and measures for you. And we want you to be like us. Alright, so we're going to continue on. I just wanted you to see this about the stars. We're going to continue on and see what the scriptures has to say now. Maybe. Genesis 1:14. It's where we found our word for stars in the Torah. And Elohim said, "Let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens, to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and for years." So first we have them for signs. That's an H226, probably from H225 in the sense of appearing, a signal, literally or figuratively, as a flag, a beacon, monument, omen, prodigy, evidence of how it works, all works together as one, evidence of how it's all supposed to work, evidence we are like the stars that are shining, evidence that the sun is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, evidence that the moon is the picture of the sapphire that Yahuwah walked on. Goes to 1022JN in the ancient Hebrew lexicon. Oh, you guys can't see that. Oh, maybe I should change that. It goes to 1022JN in the ancient Hebrew lexicon. Right here, it's an L, a Wa, and a Ta. The concrete is marked, the abstract is agree, a coming toward a mark. A standard or flag with the family mark hangs as a sign. An agreement or covenant by two where a sign or a mark of the agreement is made as a reminder to both parties. All this that's happening in the heavenly body should remind us that here on the earth we're supposed to die to our flesh and shine like the stars that are in the Shemaim, working with the blood and the DNA that flows in it, the ruby and the sapphire. The 2-letter root is the beloved Elta. The action is plow, the concrete is mark. The L is a picture of an ox, the Ta is a picture of 2 crossed sticks used to make a sign or a mark. Combined, these represent an ox moving towards a mark. Oh, with right ruling. When plowing a field with oxen, the plowman drives his oxen toward a distant mark in order to keep the furrow straight. Oh, to plant a seed. So the seed can germinate. A traveler arrives at his destination by following a mark and continuing on and on towards the end there, the coming toward a mark. A standard or flag with the family mark hangs as a sign. An agreement or covenant by two where the sign or mark of the agreement is made by a reminder to both parties. Kind of like when Abraham was promised Yitzhak. And he wanted to know what the sign of this would be between them. What would make this covenant? Let's see what the notes say. Plow point is where we're going. The Moedim, stars of righteousness, lead others not only to see the door, because that's where we get Moedim, is see the door. Are you striving to enter into it? Having a common witness. The whole system works together. And we are to be a perfect picture of the stars as they work in perfect unity with the sun and the moon to lead others to righteousness here on this earth. It's a perfect system that's been set up. For all these give light on the earth. The sun, the moon, and the stars. All across the board / the earth is agreement on units of measure. What are we being measured by? Right ruling standards that are laid out in the Torah and should be on the commands. Two cannot walk together unless they are agreed. And that agreed also comes in the Moedim line. Apparently we're going to look at that. And Elohim said that lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. There's your heavenly. And let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and for years, and to give light on the earth. It's all a picture. It's all this beautiful picture. Strong's H4150 is appointed times, moed, properly an appointment that is a fixed time or season, specifically a festival, conventionally a year, by implication an assembly, with a common witness, as convened for a definite purpose, technically the congregation. By extension, the place of meeting, also a signal is appointed beforehand. They're all up there. They're all there. And here's where we get moed, right here, or moedim. An appointment, a time that is repeated time after time, year after year after year after year, cycle after cycle after cycle, generation after generation after generation, until it's over. Company, a group that meets at specific times. We see this as action is to meet, the concrete is appointment. An appointed place, time, or event, such as the monthly or yearly feast, that is correct. At the 2-letter root, we see the ayin and the dal. Action is to repeat, the abstract is witness. The pictograph ayin is a picture of the eye, the dal is the picture of the door. Combined, these means see the door. Are we striving to enter into it? Because if we're striving to enter into it and are like stars of righteousness that shine in the Shemayim, we should be leading others to strive to enter that same door. As coming to a tent of meeting and entering in, a place, time, or event that is repeated again and again, and over and over and over and over. This is the root line where we get two cannot walk together unless they are agreed. Agreed is in this root line. We have a common witness. The witness is what was inside the ark and the marriage covenant, and what is outside the ark, the Torah, that we are to follow to get us back inside the ark to the marriage ketubah. The whole system works together. So let's go to Genesis 15 and let's see what was said to Abraham. Verses 1 through 7. After these events, after he raised his hands to the most, lifted his hand to Yahuwah, the Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, the Melchizedek, the King of righteousness. After he did all that, after those events, the word of Yahuwah came to Abraham in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great." And Abraham said, "Master Yahuwah, what would you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus?" And Abram said, "See, you have given me no seed, and see, one born in my house is my heir." There was no physical seed of Abraham that would produce a spiritual seed on down the line that was from his loins. And see, and we read that in 1 Corinthians 15. And see, the word of Yahuwah came to him, saying, "This one is not your heir, but he who comes from your own body is your heir." And he brought him outside and said, "Now look towards the heavens, and count the stars if you are able to count them." And he said to him, "So are your seed." And he believed in Yahuwah, and he reckoned it to him for righteousness' sake. And after that, they made a covenant. So, that which is of the Shemayim, the stars of the Shemayim, look to the heavens, see the stars, is now tied in the scriptures to the earth and the seed of Abraham. It's spiritual and earthly. It's heavenly and earthly. And the heavenlies, the esteem of it, that work together, are one. And if we die to the flesh, we will be one. And he said to him, "I am Yahuwah, who brought you out of Ur of the Kasdim, to give you this land to inherit it, to die to the flesh. Of all things, of Ur of the Kasdim, of Babylon, of Egypt, of Sumeria, all these other things." Did they know how to do it? Of course they did. Where do you think they got how to keep time? They didn't come up with it first. So I want to look at a few words in here, apparently. And he brought him forth. This is the King Jimmy. And he brought him forth abroad and said, "Look now toward the heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them." And he said unto him, "So shall thy seed be." So, apparently, I think I'm going to look at 56:08 first. So he's looking toward the heaven. And tell Tell the stars. It's H5608, Sapphire. A primitive root properly to score with the mark as a tally or record. This is the Strong's now. That is, by implication, to inscribe. Also to enumerate. Intensively to recount. That is, celebrate. So here we've got it used twice, but yet we've got two different English words for it. Let's go to the Theological Word Book. It is this, if you don't have it. Time is short. Might still get some time in it. That's at number 1540. I'm just going to read a little bit out of it. Maybe. Oh, I wonder what that is. 1540. Sapphire, where we get sapphire, where we get Sapphire, where we get the language that is pure. Sapphire is used of general mathematical activity. We just saw that. We just saw that. Read it in the book by Joseph Farrell, and the mathematical composition based on the heavens, based on the stars, and their perfect geometrical alignment, as it should be with the seed of Abraham. Is used of general mathematical activity. One can count objects, people, periods of time, actions, or thoughts. As well, it is employed with a negative to indicate innumerable things. Most importantly, Elohim promised an innumerable posterity to the patriarchs. We're going to see if that is got a secondary meaning to it that falls in line. And to Yisrael. Promises which look beyond the mere physical fulfillment to the spiritual seed. Hello, didn't we just read that in 1 Corinthians? Of the greater Dawid, the greater Malki, in whom they find culmination. The seed of Dawid, the root, oh, how beautiful. I didn't even know that was there, and I read it 3 times. In the Peel stem, the iterative concept, recount, takes on the added idea of tell, or declare, or to show forth. Do we see what's shining forth in what he has presented in the esteem of the Shemayim and each part thereof? Fathers are to instruct their children in the need of the primacy of Elohim in the life of his mighty wonders, so that their children may in turn transmit this information to their offspring. Over and over and over and over. A cycle of the generation, cycle of the year. Every believer is to declare the miracles and mighty deeds of the delivering Elohim. Declare his name. And declare his name. Yahuwah. Yahuwah, who breathed it all. If you go back and look at the word heaven right there, it is the concrete of breath. Oh. It's the action of breathe, the concrete of breath. Let's go look at it. Genesis 15. Verse 5. The action is breath, the action is breathe, the concrete is breath, and the abstract is desolate. Here's where we get Shemayim. The breath of man is his character and what makes one what he is. The name of an individual is more than an identifier, but descriptive of his character or breath. And the esteem of the heavenlies is one, and the esteem of the earth is another. Okay, back to reading what I was reading. Declare his name. Yahuwah. And Yahuwah himself is said to keep account in his books. The Old Testament plainly attests to its inspiration and was understood as such. Accordingly, the believer is to appropriate the book as his own, since it is the divine pre-interpretation of what is best for man regarding basic issues of life, right rulings, right measures, as the stars cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle. So we've already connected the Shemayim and the Yerets, the heaven and the earth. The Semitic verb, sinperesh, occurs with many Semitic developments. In Southwest Semitic, it means set out on a journey. In Southeast Semitic, it means to measure. In Northwest Semitic, count. The Hebrew verb is either a denominative from sefer, or has become associated with it. In favor of the former suggestion is the fact that while its synonym, mana, number, count, emphasizes the numbering process, Sapphire everywhere seems to retain the underlying remembrance of the result of that process. The final scribal recording, Sapphire, in turn, has spawned several derivatives. Man is to sing Yahuwah's praise, Psalm 79:13, in no lesser way than nature itself, Psalm 19:1. The sun is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. He's set it up there, like a tent. And to show forth his glory, Psalm 96:3. Above all, he is to tell, Sapphire, others of Elohim's righteousness, like bright and shining stars leading many to righteousness, and saving power, Psalm 66:16 and 71:15, and of the joy of living in accordance with his ordinance, Psalm 119:13. Because Paul said, you are our letter. In all of this, there is a very real hint of the scribal activity, the believer recording in his every thought, word, and action the sufficiency of the Elohim of his salvation. His whole life is to be Elohim's living letter to a needy mankind. Perfect weights, perfect measure, right place, right time, on time, every time, as a sign, moving through the moeds as a picture, with the sun, the moon, and the stars over and over and over and over. To die to the flesh here on earth, to shine like those stars. Oh. Heaven, esteem of heaven is truly one. I'm reading my notes down there. And the esteem of earth another. Esteem of earth is Yah's and the fullness thereof, and we are to die to the flesh and plant the seed of the spiritual that we read, not the fleshly, which Isaac was a picture of that seed Messiah. We exist because he exists. So shall thy seed exist. Because existence created all that exists. Here's our word here. It's to record, to make a record. Here is where we get Sefer. Same word as Sefer. Same word as the Sefer. The whole Sefer. It's where we get our Sapphire. It is where we get numbering, accounting as a recording. The action is record, the concrete is scroll. A recording of a story or numbers. From the sinpe, from the speaking of a record. I am not going to tell you these are the 12 astrological signs in the sky. I'm not going to do that. There's something in there that is, well, we've seen it. It's about accurate weights and measures and right ruling and covering the house in love. Psalm 147:4. Interesting. He appoints the number of the stars. He gives names to all of them. Psalm 147. He telleth the number of the stars. He calleth them all by their Shem, their names, because they were breathed into the Shemayim. He telleth, 1290 HV. To count or number a set of things. The grouping together or counting of those that are of the same kind, the stars that lead many to righteousness. He telleth, he counted them. They are like kind after like kind, following the truth of the master craftsman, and for this you can be for sure and for certain. He telleth, he counteth the number, accounting as a recording, a record, a scroll, a recording of a story or numbers, where we get sin pay, where we get our Sapphire in English. Yahuwah does this. He's put them all in their place. And those that are following him, that are maidens, that have not bowed the knee to Baal, are like the stars of righteousness in the sky. They work with the sun and the moon. They work with the blood and the DNA. He knows them all by name. We're just obviously focused on the righteous ones today. So we shall continue on. I don't know why I have lampstands there. Here, we'll just do this live and on the air. Watch this. So, let's go take a closer, little bit more from Abraham. Let's go back to 22:15. To 18. And the messenger of Yahuwah called to Abraham a second time from the Shemayim. And this, of course, is after he was going to sacrifice his son, his only son, Yitzhak, his only spiritual son, Yitzhak, would bring forth the line of the stars that would shine forth into righteousness and lead many others into righteousness. And the messenger of Yahuwah called to Abraham a second time from the Shemayim and said, By myself I have sworn, declares Yahuwah, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, that I shall certainly bless you, and I shall certainly increase your seed as the stars of the Shemayim and as the sand which is on the seashore. Again, we have a bringing together of the Shemayim and the Eretz. And let your seed possess the gate of their enemies. Well, now he's talking specifically about the seed of Yitzhak. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. All things under Yahuwah, in righteousness and right ruling, however he says. It's a picture of Messiah, the spiritual that has been planted, connected to the physical, the fleshly. This is our picture of the two connected, the Shemayim and the Eretz, the heavens and the earth. The spiritual picture of the spiritual that we can see right in front of us, and a picture of the earthly and the need to die to the flesh and obey his voice. And he said in verse 17, Oh, you can see down there what I wrote. That I shall certainly bless you, and I shall certainly increase your seed. Increase. Certainly. It's twice there. Rabah, a primitive root, to increase in whatever respect. Will there be more? Of course there will. They will be numbered. They will be recorded by name. Some unto eternal life in the book of life, and others unto eternal death in the lake of fire. That goes to 1439 HV, certainly increase. We just get increase. A resh, a bait, and a hay. The concrete is abundant, an abundance of number, strength, or authority. From the seed of Yitzhak will be those that shine like the stars that lead many to righteousness. And of course, then those will come in the second resurrection. But there'll be that first resurrection of those that have strength and authority, like the heads of the family. Each family has a master that rules all cases, trials, conflicts, and contests. This person was a representative for the whole tribe, one abundant in authority and wisdom. This person was a representative for each tribe. We had 12 of them. One abundant in authority and wisdom. Sarab. Oh, and I wanted to remember, I said that it was on the fourth day. This is the root line where the word fourth comes from. This is why that all took place on the fourth day. So the sun and the moon and the stars could work together. See the head of the family, Messiah, Yahuwah, blood, ruby, sun, DNA, the DNA, the sapphire, the moon, and the stars. This is why that happened on the fourth day. Not only a picture of him as our head in the Shemayim, but us dying to the flesh on the earth as a picture of this perfect picture of the stars, as we have them now, that would die to the flesh, as we saw in 1 Corinthians 15. And we'll see some more of that later. Abundant in authority and wisdom. Increase in numbers? Okay, all right. Of course. Increase in righteousness, wisdom, and authority? Yes. What stars have the connotation of equal weights and measures? Who are those? They better be the head of the family that was created on the fourth day. Underneath Yahuwah. What stars would be carrying the Sefer of Yah, the language, which is where we get Sefer, scroll, sapphire, tell the story, see the story, that comes from running in line with the sapphire stone, the DNA grid, which they want so badly. What stars work in conjunction with the ruby, the blood, the bridegroom coming out of his chambers, the sun? Could there possibly be fakes? The adversary comes as a messenger of light. Check out Skynet. China's got 2 suns. I'll leave that up to you to decide. And then I list some verses there. Job 33:12, Psalm 18:35, and Proverbs 29:2. And we're going to go to Daniel 12. I've been here several times lately. Isn't it beautiful? As soon as I get a drink. Now at that time, Michael, who is like El, who is like El, shall stand up, the great head, Sinresh, Sa'ar, who's got his government on his shoulders, maybe, who is standing over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of distress. We ain't even there yet. Maybe the pressure started for you, but we ain't even there yet. Such as never was seen since there was a nation, until that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book of the living Elohim that died to the flesh. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth wake up, wake up, wake up. It's resurrection language. Some to everlasting life, and some to reproaches, everlasting abhorrence. But there are those who have had insight, that shall shine like the brightness of the expanse, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever, in a clean, white, bright, bridal garment, like the stars running their perfect course, in line with the ruby, the sun, the blood, the moon, the grid, the DNA that he has set up, so that those here on the earth could see the beautiful picture of equal weights and measures, of covering in the love of pointing them to him. But you, O Daniel, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall diligently search, and knowledge shall increase. And let me tell you, knowledge is increased exponentially, for the good and for the not good. It depends on which side of the fence you're on, I guess. Many shall diligently search, and knowledge shall increase. So we're going to go look at Daniel. Daniel 12, verse 4. Many are looking for the knowledge of Yahuwah Elohim. $14.39 AN. Rob. They're looking for the knowledge to be abundant. If I can find it again, wasn't it H? In numbers, strength, or authority, but they'll never surpass the stars that are shining in righteousness, leading many others to righteousness. Many are looking to be abundant in authority, but there are those searching, not whipped around to and fro with every wind and wave of doctrine. It can be good, or it can be bad. An abundance of numbers, many, are strength great, from the idea of greatness in authority. The resh is a picture of a head, the bait is a picture of a tent representing the family. Combined, these mean head of the family. We already read it. Each family has a master that rules all cases, trials, conflicts, and contests. Eventually that will be Yahuwah. Book of Life, living Elohim. Right now, here we are, supposed to be having rulers judging by right ruling. This person was the representative for the whole tribe, one abundant in authority and wisdom. Let's see if we can find it here real quick since I've got this up. Well, we're going to go find it. On the fourth, right here, the fourth day, Rob, the fourth day. That's why he created the sun, the moon, and the stars on the fourth day. The four sides of a square, which you divide that in half, it makes a triangle. And you can put that inside of a circle, and you're going to have a sphere. Equal weights and measures. So we did not covering the triangle. Got it. Fourth day. That's why he made it on the fourth day. It is a picture for us. It shines light on the earth. Do you see it? Are we walking in darkness? Verse 5. Then I, Daniel, looked and saw two others standing, one on this bank of the river and the other on that bank. And one said to the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, How long till the end of these wonders, till the judgment? Till you judge these things, all Palam. And I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, and he held up his right hand and his left hand to the Shemaim, and swore by him who lives forever and ever, and he can swear by no one greater than himself. For it would be for an appointed moeds and a half. And when they have ended scattering the power of the set-apart people, then all these shall be completed. And I heard, but I did not understand. So I said, My master, what is the latter end of these? And he said, Go, Daniel, for the words are hidden and sealed till the time of the end. I'm telling you right now, we are at end near. If we're not, we're at near time to the end. Many, there's our word again. Verse 10. Many, Rob, many who are abundant in authority and shine like the stars who are of the seed of Yitzhak, who have died to the flesh here on the earth. We can see this beautiful picture of what he's painted, and we don't have to worship it to see it. Many, those ones, leading many that direction, shall be cleansed, shall be made white, shall be as bright as the stars, shall be clad with the sun, not with the sunlight like the picture the Catholic Church has painted, in light, beautiful picture, and made white and refined, like the white sapphire stone. But the wrong, like being made white in the blood of the Lamb. But the wrong shall do wrong, Revelation 22:11, and none of the wrong shall understand. They just won't get it. They're not going to get this. And those who have insight shall understand. You'll be able to discern what is the truth of this and what is the twisting of this. You will understand to be prosperous for the kingdom. He didn't just put this stuff out here just to put it out here. He painted us a picture. Again, not like the Catholic Church painted a picture of Mary with the stars and the sun and the, moon under her feet, or whatever that the picture is that you've seen. Do you understand? Do we have understanding of what it means to be Ben, to be Banat, to be sons, and to be daughters of the living Elohim, so that the house will continue? Generation after generation after generation. The picture's right before us. And from that time which is continual is taken away, and the abomination that lays waste is set up, is 1,290 days. Blessed is he who is waiting, who is enduring till the end, and earnestly comes to the 1,335 days. But you, Daniel, go your way till the end, and rest, and arise to your lot at the end of the days. There's some resurrection for Daniel going on. Again, what a beautiful picture of the stars of righteousness, leading many to righteousness. Equal weights, equal measures, covering the house in love. Psalm 66:16. Come and hear, all ye that fear Elohim, And I will declare to you, I will declare what he hath done for the whole of my person, the body, the breath, and the mind. Are we declaring that? As a bright and shining stars leading many to righteousness. Psalm 71, 12 to 16. I need to go there. O Elohim, do not be far from me. My Elohim, hasten to my help. Let those who are adversaries of my life be ashamed, consumed. Let those who seek my dysfunction cause me to be off the course of where I should be when I should be there, and to not be in line with equal weights and measures, and to be on time every time. Be covered with reproach and confusion. But I continually wait. I endure until the end. And I shall praise you. And I shall praise you. I shall praise you. I shall shine like a star in the distance of the heavenlies, right here on earth. I shall shine forth through words and actions, positively for praise, not negatively as the enemy comes as a messenger of light. I shall praise you. The hay is a picture of his man with his arms raised, looking at a great sight. Look towards Yahuwah Messiah. Look towards that which he's painted in the Shemaim for you to see as a picture of it. It's okay to look at it. Don't worship it. The lam is a shepherd's staff representing the idea of toward, as the staff is used to move a sheep toward its direction. Moving towards the plow point, the El Ta, it's a sign. Combined, these letters mean a looking towards something, such as a looking toward a light in the distance. The stars have always been used to guide the travelers or shepherd to find his home or destination, as the stars of righteousness lead many to righteousness by dying to the flesh here. A star differs in esteem from star. Use the gift you've been given and shine like the stars. Wow. And praise thee more and more. My mouth recounts, it shows forth, shining forth through words and action, thy righteousness and thy salvation, thy Yeshua, Yahushua, all day. Cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle. Though I do not know their numbers. Though I do not know their numbers. I just plant the seed. We just plant the seed. It says one planted, someone sows, another waters, Yah gives the increase. What seed are we planting? The seeds to death and to the body of the flesh, or the seed of the spiritual, Messiah Yahusha? I come in the might as one in the family of the heads that has grown up into a mature stalk from the seed that was planted inside of me. Go look up the word. Of the Master Yahusha, I make mention. I bet that's the word again. I make mention, it's not, remembrance of your righteousness. Recount it to everyone. Cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle. Psalm 119, 9-16. Maybe. How would a young man cleanse his path? How so? To die to the flesh, to be watered in the word, to go from a non-living seed to a living seed, to go from earthly to spiritual. I have sought you with all my heart. Let me not stray from your commands. I have treasured up your word in my heart, where the blood flows and the DNA is carried by the blood. You've got your ruby, you've got your sapphire, you've got your blood, you've got your DNA. You've got your sun, you've got your moon. You better be the star that shines forth. We better be. There's going to be distress like that has never been seen, that we might not sin against you. How are you going to lead them to righteousness if we're not living in righteousness? How are we going to do that? Blessed are you, O Yahuwah. Teach me your laws. With my lips. Psalm 119, verse 13. With my lips, with the language that is spoken from my lips, which is where we get the record, the scroll. With my lips, I declare the record, the recording of the story, as it is in the Shemaim. So we die to the flesh here on earth. Is that the story? Is that the shining forth that's coming from our lips? And all thy judgments, right rulings, right weights, equal measures. That's what we're going to be judged by, that of the Torah. Are we a picture of that? I have rejoiced in the way of your witness. Thought I was going to put that e-sword away. I have rejoiced in the way of thy testimonies, in thy witness. Two cannot walk together unless they're agreed. I have rejoiced in the way of your witness, in the way of your moeds, in the way of everything that's inside the ark on the ketubah, and everything that's outside. And that's the way that I walked. As over all riches, I meditate on your orders and regard your ways. I delight myself in your laws. I do not forget thy word. It is at the forefront of my mind. I give it my full attention. So what I do is go outside and look. And come back to here and compare it. Give it your full attention. Do not be distracted by every wind and wave of doctrine. Psalm 118, 14-17. Yahuwah is my strength. He is the weapon that I am intimate with, and my song. There is a song of the remnant of the 144,000. Now only they know it. He exists as my Shah, my rescuer. Yah exists. Yah. Every piece, part, and conglomerate of the weapon, the DNA that is him, that we're intimate with the weapon, and song, he's our Shua, Yahusha. Yahusha. Lost my place. And he has become my Shah. The voice of rejoicing and deliverance is in the tents of the righteous. Because we shine like the stars. Leading many to righteousness. Protecting them from the quote-unquote perfect storm, as we call it in this day and age. The right hand of Yahuwah is doing mightily. Who's that? The seed that's been planted in us. The right hand of Yahuwah is exalted. The right hand of Yahuwah acts mightily. Let me not die. Let me not die in my sins in this flesh, in a sinful state, but let me live unto the living Elohim, and declare Sapphire, bring forth from my lips as a bright and shining star, with right equal weights and measures, the works of Yah. Let me declare the recording of them, and everything that comes out done by equal weights and measures. Oh, isn't that beautiful? Just keep reading. Oh, isn't that beautiful? Okay, but we're not going to read all that. So I'll get way off on a tangent. 2 Corinthians 3, 1-6. This obviously is Shaul speaking to the assembly at Corinth. Are we to begin to recommend ourselves again? Or do we need some letters of recommendation to you or from you? You are our letter, having been written in our hearts, known and read by all men. Stars and leaders of righteousness, like Shaul leading many to righteousness. It's like this living letter, cycle after cycle after cycle. It's like being scribed on people's hearts. Yah gives the increase. The seed is planted, one waters, another sows. Yah gives the increase. And they're like a living letter. Count them if you can. Making it obvious that you are a letter of Messiah, of the seed, served by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living Elohim, not on tablets of stone, but on fleshly tablets of the heart, which pumps the blood that contains the DNA, which pumps through the entire body, which is the fullness of the authority that should be inside of us. That's a picture of our heart. And such trust we have towards Elohim through Messiah. Not that we are competent in ourselves to reckon any as from ourselves. We're not planting an earthly seed of ourselves, a fleshly seed. We read that in 1 Corinthians. But our competence is from Elohim, the seed, the spiritual seed, who also made us competent servants of a renewed covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills the flesh. If the flesh is dead, we're not under that anymore, because we're dead to it. If we break it, then we're back under it, just like the law that we have here. We run the red light, we're under it. We're under that law. But if we don't run the red light, we've got no problem. Well, we're supposed to not have any problem. But the Spirit gives life to follow the letter that kills the flesh. Those that lead many to righteousness, They're like a living letter. We're supposed to be like a living letter. Cycle after cycle after cycle, shining forth through words and actions like stars that were created on the fourth day. Abundant in strength and authority. Living letters. First Corinthians 15. Let's go back and read the chapter now. But brothers, I make known to you the good news. Take my glasses off so I can see what I wrote. But brothers, I make known to you the good news, which is Messiah crucified, which I brought as good news to you, which you also did receive, and in which you stand. A man of righteousness brought the good news to the people at Corinth, to lead many to righteousness. That Messiah, the spiritual seed, shed his blood like a bridegroom coming out of the chamber in the bloodline, and in which you stand. Stand on it. Walk forth like the DNA, like the moon, like Yahuwah Elohim, who walked on the white work of Sapphire, through which you also are being saved, if you hold fast the word, if you walk in that word, and shine forth through words and actions I brought as good news to you. Otherwise, you have believed in vain. You have to walk it out. For I delivered to you at the first that which I also received, a bright and shining star leading many to righteousness, that Messiah died for our sins according to the Scripture, and that he was buried, and that he was raised, because the word could not return void, on the third day, according to the Scriptures. Before we can get back to original state that was breathed in the very beginning, we must be born and die in the flesh through the Torot, and the Torot is spiritual. That's interesting. That's just a note on the side there. And he was seen by Kepha, and then by the 12. After that he was seen by over 500 brothers at one time, of whom the greater part remain till now, but some have fallen asleep. After that he was seen by Jacob, then by all the emissaries. This is all about the resurrection. First, Yahushua being resurrected, Yahuwah, the word that does not return void, being resurrected because it cannot return void. That which is his power, strength, and authority cannot return void. If your word returns void to you, that makes you a liar. And he's no liar. And last of all, he was seen by me also, as if to one born prematurely. For I am the least of the emissaries, who am not worthy to be called an emissary, because I persecuted the assembly of Elohim. But by the favor of Elohim, I am what I am, and his favor toward me was not in vain. But I labored much more than they all. Yet not I, but the favor of Elohim within me. He is laboring, shining forth through words and actions. If it wasn't for Yah giving the increase, he wouldn't have it. Whether then it was I, or they, so we proclaimed, and so you believed. The emissaries proclaim. They shine forth through words and actions like bright and shining stars, equal weights, equal measures, and loving the house by giving them the perfect record of what Yahuwah has done and the picture that he's painted for us, so that they will believe, and believing is an action that they must walk out in that same perfection, dying to the flesh. And if Messiah is proclaimed that he has been raised from the dead, How do some among you say there is no resurrection of the dead? And if there is no resurrection of the dead, then Messiah has not been raised. We in trouble if that's not the truth. And if we might as well get out there with the rest of them. And if Messiah has not been raised, then our proclaiming is empty, and your belief also is empty. Where are we leading them to then? And we are also found false witnesses. False witnesses are messengers of light that the enemy sends forth. They'd be false witnesses of Elohim if there was no resurrection. Because we have witnessed of Elohim that he raised up Messiah. The seed that was planted in the earth returned not void. The seed that was planted in you should return not void. Whom he did not raise up, then if the dead are not raised. For if the dead are not raised, then neither Messiah has been raised. And if Messiah has not been raised, your belief is to no purpose. You are still in your sins. The righteous can't. Well, let's leave that. This is all about the resurrection and the seed that's been planted in you and where we're leading others to. It's the whole context of this whole chapter. Then also those who have fallen asleep in Messiah have perished. So if those that fell asleep makes him a liar. Back chapter 12 of Daniel says, wake up, you who are in the dust. Makes the whole book. And there are those out there that would like you to believe that. If in this life only we have expectation in Messiah, we are all, of all men, the most wretched. Because we must lead others. To the first resurrection. But now Messiah has been raised up from the dead and has become the first fruit of those having fallen asleep. Wake up, wake up. Wake up now. We could die in 5 minutes right now. We could be gone. We need to wake up so that we can wake up. Like Lazarus and that picture of the first resurrection. For since death is through a man, resurrection of the dead is also through a man. One seed was planted in the earth, Adam. The seed that was planted in the earth, Messiah. Brings us resurrection. For since death is through a man, resurrection of the dead is also through a man. For as we all die in Adam, because we're all dead, born of this fleshly earth, so also shall we be made alive in Messiah, the seed that's planted in us. What are we sowing to? And each in his own order, Messiah the first fruits, then those who are of Messiah at his coming. Then the end, when he delivers up the reign of Elohim to the Father, when he has brought to naught all rule and all authority and all power. For he has to reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. Just like we saw him walking on the white work of sapphire stone, all has to be put under his feet so that everything eventually walks in accordance or is stamped out per se by the DNA of his word. The last enemy to be brought to naught is death. Are we going to die? Are we going to live? That's the last enemy, lake of fire. For he has put all under his feet. But when he says all are put under him, it is clear that he who put all under him is expected. It's the fullness of Yahuwah among us. We are expecting Yahuwah, our husbandman, in his full and perfect order. Full and perfect order will cover the earth. The word, the seed, they no longer will have it out of order. And okay, that's just a note I had. And when all are made subject to him, then the seed, the word, the Son, who is in the perfect order, shall also be shown that he was always subject to him in his perfect order. It will be shown in that time to him who put all under him, in order that Elohim be all in all. It's going to all be spiritual. It's no longer going to be earthly as we see it now, for this earth is going to pass away when all is under his feet. Otherwise, what shall they do who are immersed for the dead, if the dead are not raised at all? What are we being immersed for? To die to what, if we're not even going to get raised? It's a picture of baptism. Why indeed are they immersed for the dead? Why? Why are we immersed? To be set up for the first resurrection, to die to the flesh, to endure till the end. And why do we stand in danger every hour? Why do we? Boy, is it coming. I affirm by the boasting in you, which I have in Messiah Yahusha our Master. I die day by day. He dies to the flesh, to be intimate and to shine forth through words and action like a star of righteousness that will lead many to righteousness. If as men do I have fought with beasts at Ephesus, of what good is it to me, if the dead are not raised? Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Let's just go join them. Let's eat, drink, for tomorrow we die. They did that same kind of thing at Sinai. Do not be led astray. Do not miss the mark in being intimate, so that when he is revealed, you can shine and be clad like the sun. Shine like a star, be clad like the sun. Evil company corrupts good habits. Watch who you walk with. You hang out at the barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. Wake up to soberness, righteously, and do not sin, for some do not have the knowledge of Elohim. I speak this to your shame, because they can't lead others. But someone might say, how are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come? Senseless one, what you sow is not made alive unless it dies. Unless it dies to its own ways. We read it at the very beginning. Germination of seeds is a process by which seed-bearing plants change from living. We're living in the flesh. We are alive here on the earth. We're only supposed to be sojourning here, though. Plants change from living, non-reproducing life to living, reproducing life in a plant. At germination, the plant does not begin life, but rather resumes the growth and development that was temporarily suspended. No seed will germinate unless it has water. What you sow is not made alive unless it dies to the things of this earth and to the flesh, to bring forth the living. And as to what you sow, you do not sow the body, the flesh, which is to be, but a bare grain. It might be wheat or some other grain. But Elohim gives it a body as he wishes, and to each seed a body of its own. It's got different gifts. It's got things to die to. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another of fishes, and another of birds, and heavenly bodies and earthly bodies. The heavenly bodies are a picture of the spiritual and oneness. But the esteem of the heavenlies is truly one. is running in its perfect order as He's set it up to run it. It's a picture for us. And the esteem of the earth is another. What is the esteem of the earth? That we die to the flesh. It's what the whole chapter is about. That we be in the first resurrection, that we die to being the seed of Adam, the earthly, and become the seed of Messiah, the spiritual. We see the picture of it. One esteem of the sun, the blood, the ruby, the bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and another esteem of the moon, the white paved work of sapphire stone that's carried in the blood which he walked on, and another esteem of the stars, for star differs from star. For Yahuwah is the potter, and we are the clay. Gifts. We differ in gifts. The geometric functions of the stars is different. They all work in this same right ruling, but they are lined up geometrically different that makes the whole system work like a body. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption, the flesh. It is raised in incorruption, the spiritual. It is sown in disrespect. It is raised in esteem. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, like Adam, of the earth. It is raised a spiritual body, made like Messiah at his resurrection, because it did not go astray. There is a natural body, and there is a spiritual body. And so it has been written, the first man, Adam, became a living being here on the earth. The last Adam, Yahusha, a life-giving spirit. The first man was of the earth, earthly. The second man is the master from the Shemaim. As is the earthly, so also are those who are earthly, that do not die to the flesh. As is the heavenly, so also those who are heavenly, who walk in the Spirit, following the Torah, shine like the stars that lead many to righteousness, so they can be in the first resurrection. And we have borne the likeness of the earthly. Here we are, needing to die to the flesh. We shall also bear the likeness of the heavenly, of Messiah, bright and shining stars, but we shall take on the light of Messiah, which is a picture of the bridegroom, because we're supposed to be the bride, seeing the bridegroom coming out of his chamber. And this I say, brothers, that flesh and blood is unable to inherit the reign of Elohim, neither does corruption inherit incorruption. This earthly will not inherit the spiritual. See, I speak a secret to you. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed, in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised, first resurrection, incorruptible, and we shall be changed, to be like Messiah, 1 John chapter 3. For this corruptible has to put on incorruption, and this mortal has to put on immortality. And when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, gotten rid of the flesh, and gotten into the spirit, finally in that day made like him, when the dead are raised, at the last trump, then shall come to be the word that has been written, death is swallowed up in overcoming, because the second death has no power of those that are in the first resurrection. O death, where is your sting? O grave, where is your overcoming? And the sting of death is sin, because it didn't die to the flesh. And the power of the sin is the Torah, because the flesh don't want to follow it. Thanks to Elohim, who gives us the overcoming. Are we overcomers in Messiah? Through our Master, Yahusha Messiah. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Master, knowing that your labor, shining forth through words and actions, like the stars, leading many to righteousness, is not in vain in the Master. can't find what I was looking for. First, we have to go through the natural. First the natural, then the spiritual. First, we have to go through dying to this flesh to get to the spiritual. That's what I wanted to say. To be the bride of Messiah. Revelation 12, 1-5. Picture of the bride. And a great sign was seen in the heaven. A woman we are supposed to be being made into the bride, clad with the sun, shining forth the light of Messiah through words and through the seed that's planted in us, through words and through action, shining like the brightness of the stars, with the moon under her feet. Why was it under her feet? For the same reason that Yahuwah walked with the white work of sapphire under his feet. We're walking in the perfection of the DNA and the grid that was laid out, because the heavenlies are connected to the earthly. The DNA of the heavens that we see is connected to the DNA that's in us. That's a whole nother story. And on her head was a crown of 12 stars. Why? Because she's from all the 12 tribes of Yisrael. She's these bright and shining stars. She's from each and every one. And not only that, she leads each and every one as the head, the Rab, of course under Messiah, but here on the earth, of the families. In right ruling and righteousness, judging the cases and the conflicts between us. And being pregnant, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. Of what? The seed planted inside of us. All creation groans. Are we groaning for it? And another sign was seen in the heaven, and see a great fiery dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. And his tail drew a third of the stars of the Shemaim, and he threw them down to earth. And the dragon stands before the woman who is about to give birth. He wants the seed of the bride like you don't even know. Just like he wanted Messiah. And when he was in the wilderness, led there by the Ruach HaKodesh, led in there to be tried and to be tested. He wants that seed, and he wants the seed that's in you, which is the DNA. Wants to devour it. And she bore a male child, Yahusha was born, who was to shepherd all nations with a rod of iron. Is that who's in us? And her child was caught away for Elohim and for his throne as the right hand power, strength, and authority. We read that in Psalms. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has been a place prepared by Elohim to be nourished there 1,260 days. Yah has given us this beautiful picture of the bride and the stars, the bride shining forth in righteousness, being clad with the sun, with the light being made white in the blood of the Lamb, shining forth like a light, walking on the DNA, the Torah, the commands which he has laid out. It's all picture. It's not the picture, again, that the Catholic Church has painted. We don't need a picture to worship it. We've got this picture to show us the beauty. We've got it painted right before us. What do we need that for? His bride is that woman. And the picture is recorded in the sky. It's the seed of Abraham, the seed of Isaac, and the seed of Jacob. What a beautiful picture. Father, we just thank you, Yahuwah, for breathing the seed of Messiah in us to give us everlasting life, that we might die to this flesh and lead many others to righteousness. Father, that the heads of the family, Yahuwah, would come forth and lead us into righteousness, Yahuwah. I love you, Yahuwah. We love you, Yahuwah. Father, cause us to die, to bring forth life in others, Yahuwah. let us be counted and numbered as worthy. Yahuwah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.